All right, welcome to part 4 of the Roman Empire. Now we're going to take a look at the Second Punic War. Now, despite the defeat of the Carthaginians in the First Punic War, the Carthage was still a pretty powerful nation, right? Now, they'd been thwarted from moving northward and taking Sicily, but that doesn't mean they began looking to other directions, someplace for their great leader Hamilcar to take his forces. Now, they looked eastward, but going eastward didn't make a lot of sense because you had to fight Ptolemy's Egypt, and that was still a pretty formidable force, so you didn't want to really do that. South wasn't really an option because, yeah, you have the African nations there in the south, but you have to first cross the formidable Sahara Desert to get to them. And so the logical thing was to move to the smaller tribes and disorganized bands of people to the west, right? Specifically Spain. Right. So Hamilcar is going to land there and he's going to begin bringing many of the Spanish tribes under his control. Now, he had taken with him his 9-year-old son, who was named Hannibal. Okay. Now, according to legend, Hamilcar had told or had made Hannibal swear an oath of everlasting hatred towards Rome. It's kind of like, hey, Dad, can I go with you on this trip? And Hamilcar said, you can, but you must first swear an oath of hatred towards Rome. Okay. Which, of course, the young Hannibal does, right? Now, a couple decades down the road, Hamilcar has died and Hannibal has taken over for his father. He is now in control of the Carthaginian colonies in Spain. Now, meanwhile, while this was all going on, Rome is expanding as well, and they begin expanding northward and westward along the coast of southern France, right? Now, ultimately, that's going to lead the Romans and the Carthaginians to come back together again. They're going to run into each other near the city of Saguntum, which is today, it's just north of modern-day Valencia in Spain, right? And thus, we're going to have in 219 BCE, the beginning of the Second Punic War, right? Now, this is going to be a war that is going to push Rome right onto the brink of defeat because Hamilcar's son Hannibal, who's now in charge of these Carthaginian colonies here in Spain, turns out to be one of the greatest military commanders of all time. He's a tactical genius. Now, he knew that Roman success was based on their ability to draw upon their allies and the Sokai for their military, right? They can always build up these large forces, that manpower reserve they have. So he says, what I need to do is I need to invade Italy itself and create a situation where these allies, the Sokai, can be offered the ability, at least, to declare independence and break away, cut Italy or Rome off from this manpower reserve it has, right? And so in 281 BCE, in order for Hannibal to get from Spain to Italy, in that year, he daringly crosses the Alps, right? These are high, icy mountains, very treacherous, infested with murderous hill tribes and things like that, right? Now, he's got 40,000 men and 37 war elephants. Yes, this is the famous event of Hannibal crossing the Alps on war elephants and supposedly terrifying the Roman people with these war elephants bearing out of the mountains. It doesn't really actually work out that way. Of the 40,000 men that crossed the Alps with Hannibal, only 20,000 men survived the trip. And of the war elephants, 37 war elephants, only one of them survived the trip. Even Hannibal lost one eye, right? So the Romans promptly dispatched their army with the intent of wiping out Hannibal's smaller, weakened force. But Hannibal, like I said, very ingenious commander, outwitted the Roman commander, and the Romans were completely slaughtered. So what did the Romans do? Well, of course, they raise a second army. Do what the Romans do. Hannibal draws them into an ambush, wipes out the second army. The Romans then take nearly 2 years to build up two new complete armies and marched both of them out together, each one under the command of the consuls. So both consuls were set out in order to confront Hannibal in 216 BCE at a place called Cannae, right? Now, normal strategy of this time would dictate that Hannibal would put his best troops at the center of his line and put his weaker troops out there on the flank. But as I mentioned before, here at Cannae, we see the military genius that is Hannibal. At the Battle of Cannae, he is going to reverse this strategy. He's going to put his weakest troops in the center, kind of bowed outwards too, so that they can kind of flex inward, because their orders are to take on the strong Roman legions in front of them and to give ground. You got to back up. This gives time for his flanks, which are very strong, to wipe out the weaker Roman flanks and effectively lure the Roman strong forces into a position to where they are being attacked from all sides at the same time, a Kesselschlag, a cauldron battle, right? And this works. The Romans find themselves completely encircled. Their formations begin to break down, and the battle turns into a massacre. In one single afternoon, Hannibal wipes out 65,000 Roman soldiers. And I mean not casualties, I mean dead, killed. To put this in perspective, in 10 years in Vietnam, the United States lost 57,000 troops in the Vietnam War. 57,000 killed, right? In one afternoon, Hannibal wipes out 65,000 Roman soldiers. This battle and this tactic that Hannibal used in the Battle of Cannae is so well orchestrated that even to this very day, it is still studied by military academies around the world as a classic example of a battle of encirclement. Okay, so let's take stock of the situation. Hannibal has effectively wiped out 4 armies in 3 engagements there in the Italian peninsula. The Romans are thrown into a frenzy of panic and despair. Hannibal is marching right up to the gates of Rome. Unfortunately, that's where he has to stop because the Romans at this point are going to barricade themselves inside the city and, of course, as the Romans do, refuse to surrender, right? Hannibal's army lacks siege equipment, and so he's soon forced to depart in order just to keep his army fed. So after the disaster of Cannae, the Romans selected a new leader, a guy by the name of Fabius. And Fabius is going to appoint a new strategy. He says, all right, we're going to rebuild our army, but we are not going to give Hannibal a chance to kill more Romans, all right? So the Roman armies are going to now begin a tactic where they're going to follow Hannibal wherever he goes here in the Italian peninsula. But whenever Hannibal turns to attack, Fabius is going to back off, right? Fabius is going to get a new name as a result of this, Fabius Cunctator, right? Which literally means Fabius the Delayer, okay? In the aftermath of this, of the Battle of Cannae, Hannibal had hoped that some of these Italian cities that Rome was relying on for their manpower would revolt against Rome, but the vast majority of them remained loyal, even though this was a time of maximum weakness. That Roman policy of partial citizenship and generosity towards its conquered had begun to bear some fruit, right? The result was simply this. Hannibal is going to be reduced to roaming the Italian countryside, unconquered and undefeated, but also frustratingly looking for someone to fight. For the next 12 years, he is going to be dominating the regions around Rome, but unable to take Rome itself. Meanwhile, Rome is doing what Rome does. It builds new armies, right? And one of these armies is sent to Spain under a talented commander by the name of Publius Cornelius Scipio, right? And Scipio also turned out to be a very astute military genius. He begins conquering the Carthaginian territories in Spain, right? Matter of fact, he even killed Hannibal's brother. Hannibal learned about this when the Romans literally actually launched the head of Hannibal's brother into a Carthaginian camp in which Hannibal was at, right? All of a sudden, Hannibal's own brother's head comes flying into the encampment, right? Scipio next began invading North Africa, and he began forcing the Carthaginian government to do something about this, right? Carthage itself is becoming endangered. So Hannibal is sent, a messenger is sent to Hannibal ordering him to return to Carthage and defend the capital city, right? These two great commanders then, Scipio and Hannibal, are going to come together in 202 BCE in the Battle of Zama. And Hannibal, for the first time in his entire military history, will be defeated. And as a result of that, in 201 BCE, Carthage is going to surrender to the Romans. So here we are in the aftermath of the Second Punic War, right? And there's 5 important effects of the Second Punic War. Carthage has to pay a large cash indemnity again to Rome, another big fine, right? Spain and North Africa are transformed into several tax-paying Roman provinces under Roman governors, the same model that was established there in Sicily. Carthage itself had to give up all its territory and all of its military. Nothing was left of Carthage except the city itself, right? The Roman army was transformed into from a militia into a professional army. It was decided at this point that the empire had grown big enough that it had to have a permanent, professional, trained army. And of course, they adopted many new pieces of equipment and tactics from the Carthaginians, typical Roman style, right? Now, we're going to take the stuff we like. The Scipio family acquired an enormous amount of dignitas. Remember, that's very important in Roman society. A matter of fact, Scipio himself acquired a new name, Scipio Africanus, or in other words, Scipio the Conqueror of Africa. Okay. Now, in the long run, the effect of this is very important because up to this point, you had a rough equilibrium amongst the aristocracy in Rome. But after this, the Scipio family is going to become the dominant aristocratic power in Rome, right? It's going to the scales are not going to be even anymore, right? So Rome now turns its attention to the kingdoms to the east, right? The ones that were created by the breakup of Alexander the Great's empire. Right? Now, the east is Greek, which means it's richer, it's more urbanized, it's more culturally sophisticated, right? And it's also something of an unknown land to the Romans, right? The Roman war machine proved, though, too much to be for the Alexander's successors, right? One by one, they were conquered by Rome, right? Rome began reorganizing the territories into tax-paying provinces, the same they had done in Sicily, right? The Scipio family dominated these governorships in the east. For example, one of Scipio's own brothers led the key campaigns against Asia Minor and the Ionian coast, right? As a result of this, he was given a new name. He was called Scipio Asiaticus, or the conqueror of Asia, right? This also, of course, also brought Greeks themselves to Rome. Thousands of them were enslaved and transported to Italy, right? Many Greek slaves became tutors to Roman children and began to teach them. Matter of fact, they were called pedagogus, these Greek slaves. The word pedagogy comes from the Greek slaves that taught Roman children, the pedagogus, all right? So, as a result of this, now you have Roman commanders that are ruthless, like they've always been, but instead, when they conquer territory, they'll recite Greek poetry as they watch your city burn, right? Rome and Romans became rich as they conquered these eastern territories. And by 167 BCE, all taxes on Roman citizens had been abolished. The tax-paying provinces now paid all the revenue into Rome, and the revenue in the Roman state had increased by a factor of 6, right? And individual Romans, particularly the successful generals, had become stupidly wealthy. So on the surface, the Roman Republic looks like an unqualified success, right? But lurking behind are the seeds for its own destruction, right? This internal turmoil that's ultimately going to lead to the collapse of the Republic and the creation of the empire, right? Dreams of wealth by many poor Roman farmers led them to selling their farms and joining the army. Now, some soldiers got rich and they came back, but most of them did not. And so they came back poor and also homeless. So these veterans, many of them would end up settling in Rome, employed or unemployed. The city of Rome itself swelled to over 1 million people by the 1st century BCE, right? The unforeseen long-term consequences of Roman imperialism began to disrupt the small family farms. Those began to disappear. Because what you have here is you have the Roman generals and commanders who were successful. They come back, they have a lot of money. What do they got to spend it on? Well, the only logical thing to spend it on is land. So they begin buying up these farms, right? These farms then need farmers. Well, where do you get the farmers from? Well, logically, you would say, what about all these unemployed former farmers, veteran soldiers in Rome? No, there's also a lot of slaves that have been brought in as a result of Roman imperialism, and that's a source of stupidly cheap labor. So you use the slaves of the conquered people to work the farms, and you have a whole cycle that continues to repeat itself. Everybody's going to be discontented, right? More wars produce more poor war veterans and more rich generals. You got more farms sold off to the rich generals and more slaves that are brought in to work these farms. And you got this endless cycle in which everyone is unhappy. Roman veterans are resentful because they had done their duty, but they end up poor, farmless, and ignored. Roman aristocrats are unhappy because the wealth and dignitas from the wars are being monopolized by a few men and a few prominent families. The half citizens and allies are unhappy because they wanted full Roman citizenship for helping conquer these foreign lands, right? And of course, there's millions of foreigners who had been brought in as slaves who are unhappy for very obvious reasons, right? And so now the seeds are all sown for this entire house of cards to come crashing down.